Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I can read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Our next letter comes from May. May writes, Dear Kent, it took me months to write this because I kept wondering what happened in this relationship. To this day, I still can't wrap my head around it. This is a very interesting premise, and I'm now very keen to find out what indeed has happened, and maybe I can share some insights. So let's get into it. May writes, A year ago, I met an incredible woman on a dating app. Anne lived in Los Angeles, English, said she was regularly going to be in my country, which is Europe, for work over the next 1.5 years. Her profile said she was looking for queer friends to hang out with, but also mentioned she was single. We had a fun and flirty conversation and decided to meet. Sparks were flying straight away. She was very attractive, funny, intelligent, and interesting. Drinks turned into dinner, during which we had intense, deep conversations. Afterwards, we went for a romantic late night stroll, and I decided to ask whether she wanted to be more than friends, and I asked if I could kiss her. She replied, I would love that. It was a magical night, and when I got home, she texted and said that I was all that she could think of. Wow. So I'm going to take a little pause here just to say, we're already off to a very romantic start. As usual, it's quite intense. Uh, and, it seems like May has been really enjoying this experience with Anne, where it feels just like she's met someone who shares a lot of interests, lots of great deep conversation. Being told you're all like that I can think about is really hot and attractive. I get that. Now, putting all that to one side, as someone who's been there, done that, and experienced all that before, I will say that that level of intensity early on can itself usually be the prelude to problems down the line. I know a lot of people might not realize that, and they might think, oh, well, this is just how dating should be, right? This is what we want to feel. Ugh, no, on the basis that as someone who's had a running track record of dates that have started out seemingly heavenly, Garden of Eden-esque, like the Garden of Eden, we all know how that story ended. And I think it just goes to show that often the intensity masks quite a few things. There's a lack of groundedness. There's also often not a clear understanding of what a secure, more grounded love actually feels like. When it's that intense, it often, embodies some limerence, which in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. But when limerent brain runs the show, we often tend to go in a little bit too hard, too deep with the people that we're connecting with, and we don't take enough time to sit back and be an observer. One thing my colleague Tawny talks a lot about in dating, and it's a really good way of actually learning to date again after experiences, particularly with those that are severely avoidant, is to be watching what the other person says and just listening to them a bit more intently than necessarily getting too hooked on all the good things that are happening. It's not about denying yourself the pleasures and enjoyments of dating. It's more just about being like, just pay attention to what this person's saying and how does their, what is it they're saying and how does it make you feel? Like when they say things like, oh, I just want to go with the flow. At one point in time, that might have sounded sexy because the spontaneity is something that you feel you don't have in your life. But if you're intentionally dating and someone says that, that might come across as a bit of an ick factor. Anne hasn't said that based on what I'm reading. But sometimes that level of intensity from someone, I now look back and go, why are you so into me? You don't even know me that well. Like, we've just gotten to know each other, and I'm flattered that you're that into me. Like, honestly, that's huge compliment. I'll take that. But I also don't know you. You don't really know me. It's not like, it may feel like we're Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers, but once again, that story is as old as time and didn't end well for either of those characters, although for much more tragic reasons than usually what happens in these cases. But really, where I'm going with this is we tend to lose a lot of that prefrontal cortex cognitive thinking when there's so much intensity going on. I want to make it clear. Grounded, healthy love can have moments of intensity. That's totally fine. But all up front loaded like this, is usually the start of a beautiful nightmare, which is what I've been seeing across these letters for so many cases. And it's just important for people to be aware of because we see this happen again and again and again, and it's really full on for people. All right, so let's continue. May writes, we then had 2 incredible weeks together where we were laughing and talking. The more I got to know Anne, the more I fell in love. She had lots of hobbies, a wide circle of friends, a strong relationship with her brothers. She was very successful. Because she was 20 years older, I also assumed she must be emotionally mature. Yeah. Yes, that assumption. Um, Emotional age is unfortunately something we have to take care of by doing the inner work on ourselves. Biological age does not account for emotional age, unfortunately. Anyways, May writes, the sex between us was also fantastic. After a while, Anne moved out of her hotel so we could stay at my place for the remaining days. It just felt so right, like we'd been living together for ages. She would say, I really want a long-term relationship. I look forward to years and years with you. 12 months from now, I'll move to Europe or you can move to the US. Okay, pause. Again, this is so quick. Like, I understand that in the moment, I understand that a lot of people might think, well, what does pace have to do with anything? Like, plenty of people can get together in a short amount of time. Yeah, but it's not often the basis for a healthy foundation. You know, when I'm reading this, on one hand, flattering, encouraging, so nice to hear that the person who seemingly mature and has a successful life is wanting to say, I totally want to move over to your country, or potentially you can come to mine and we can make it work out. Like hearing that is just so delightful. However, it's too much. It's full on. It's like, whoa, where's the brakes? It doesn't mean that we have to, like, I know there's this fear too that, like, oh, if we don't keep it up, we're going to lose the spark, we're going to lose the attraction. No, you won't. That's just a lot of anxiety and stuff coming up and scarcity thinking where it's like, oh my God, if I don't contribute much, I'm going to lose this. And I'm not saying, May, you were feeling this, and I'm not saying that Anne was either, but I know there's that fear of like, I have to keep it up, otherwise we're going to lose, the connection that we have. It's like, no, that's when our little 12-year-olds and 10-year-olds are desperately trying to hold on to the connection for dear life. And they're just like, I'll say anything to make it work. And that's real anxious attachment sort of stuff where it's that whole thing of like, I will salvage the connection over prioritizing my own safety and well-being. So yeah, this sort of intensity. raises a lot of alarm bells in my head where I'm just like, whoa, too much. Lovely and too much. But again, I know that for you, May, you're writing this and you probably, you look back on that and go, that felt amazing. And it would have felt amazing. I've been in your shoes before. I know how incredible it feels. And at the same time, I also can look back on some of those moments I had where I'm like, ah, yeah, red flag one, two, and three, when this person said A, B, C, and X, Y, Z. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where the clues were often at the start. Okay, let's continue. When Anne left for 2 weeks to go on holiday with friends elsewhere in Europe, we missed each other a lot, but we sent pictures and FaceTimed every night. Strangely, I started feeling very anxious. Oh dear, you probably felt her pulling away. Some days I would write to say I missed her, only to be left on read for hours, and then I get a text late at night saying, "Hey, what's up?" with no acknowledgement of my earlier text. There we go. I figured I was just being crazy. No, you're not crazy. I can understand why you feel that way, but the minute you said I started feeling anxious, my brain went, I know why you felt anxious, because there was a little bit of distance being created between the two of you, wasn't there? Anyways, when Anne returned, I forgot all about my anxiety. We spent another glorious 2 weeks together and even said, I love you for the first time. So, just for the sake of getting to know the timeline of this, what are we, a month in and there's already the I love yous being stated? I mean, on one hand, amazing, but I'm going to go back to my original point, which is again very quick, very fast. Also, I will say, whilst this can happen a lot in all kinds of dating, I will take a moment to say that in LGBTQIA plus dating, this tends to happen far more often because often a lot of us are so love starved that we can be put into these dynamics very quickly if we're not careful. So just saying there is a higher likelihood of those of us in alphabet soup land to have these kind of experiences where we tend to get overwhelmed quite easily by the amount of attention and love we're receiving. So there is that. Anyways, let's keep going. Okay. I so we've said the I love yous, and one night over dinner, I asked her if anyone had ever proposed to her. She said, Whoa. Whoa. Sorry. I had to pause when I just read this. Anne said she had had 15 relationships in her life. Far out. Like, Jesus, like, I can barely count the number of relationships I've had on the top of my hand, and that's being generous. But, like, far out, 15. That's not an enviable number. Like, that's like, what? Like, I know she's 20 years older, and I'm assuming that she might be anywhere between like 40s, 50s, maybe even nearing 60s, but 15. No, that's too much. And it suggests to me there's something very wrong here. That image of success that she has going on, the friends, the close relationship with her brothers, her success in her professional life, something tells me it's masking a lot of internal stuff that's not going on. 15 relationships, far out. Ugh, too many, too many. Um, so she mentioned she'd had 15 relationships, the longest of which had lasted 4 years. So I figured someone must have, someone was, oh, so I figured someone must have proposed to her. And she said no. And then she said, why are you going to ask me? And I asked whether she would say yes. She winked and said, you'll just have to wait and see, won't you? I just can't understand how she could have even had a 4 year relationship without the topic of proposals and marriage ever coming up once. Like to me, that just seems highly peculiar. Like this is really weird. Also, on that note of where, you know, she says to you, you'll just have to wait and see, won't you? Playful, but I have dated so many avoidants who do this where they can be very playful around timelines, around commitment, and it's part of their withholding. It's where they won't actually be like, yeah, let's do this. Or if they do say we're going to do this, it'll all be controlled by them in terms of when it's happening. They'll delay it. They'll be like, oh, I'm not ready to be official in a relationship. Oh, I'm just busy with work. We have so many issues in our relationship. We just need to like sort them out before we can be together, whatever it is they'll say. And the point that I'm really trying to impress upon people is to say that this is still a very immature thing to say. A more secure thing would have been to say, hey, you know, like on one hand, I'm interested in the idea of where this could go, and potentially that might be something that I'm open to. But historically, I haven't felt called to propose or even be proposed to because marriage just isn't in the cards for me. It's not something that I really value or prioritize. I could see why it mattered to some of my partners, but it's not really something for me. Maybe it's something that I'm open to negotiation within reason, but it's not really on the cards for me right now. Like that's a much more grounded way of saying it because, you know, it's that thing of saying something quite honest, which is like, look, this is where I stand on it. You can like it or leave it. And people may not like your answer, and that's a good thing. This kind of answer is it sort of adds mystery, intrigue, but at the same time creates distance because you're like, what is your actual opinion on marriage? Like, can you just give me a straight answer on what this is? I worry when I see people who speak in euphemisms and also just don't answer things directly, which Anne has already demonstrated by not, replying directly to previous messages, which makes me think she's someone who creates a lot of distance. And I think the fact that she's quite old compared to yourself, May, you know, makes me want, it kind of takes me back to some letters I've read before where, the avoidant attacher has an issue with how old they are and they want to date really young. And it makes them feel better about themselves because they don't like aging. And I worry that this might actually be a bit predatory of her, where she's just, controlling the dynamic a bit with, what feels safe for her. So yeah, my 2 cents on this is this doesn't feel great already. Like this is feeling really quite controlling from the sounds of it. Anyways, let's continue. When I mentioned my occasional anxiety, Anne said she was 100% sure of her love for me. She did say she was afraid I'd get sick of her, low self-esteem much. And she says all my previous girlfriends were disappointed in me once they got to know the real me after the initial dating happiness. Gee, I wonder why that might have been. I had no idea what she was talking about. Quote unquote, growing up, I didn't have any good relationship models, Anne confessed. I'm not sure I've ever gone from being in love to love with another person. I suggested doing preventative couples therapy, which she said sounded like a great idea. And she would say, I'm so glad I met you. It has really changed my world. I consider myself the luckiest person in the world that you've chosen to love me. Chosen. That's not quite how love works, I'm afraid. Like, I mean, yes, we do have degrees of agency in who we love, but at the same time, it's not like May's just gone and been like, I'm choosing to love you because, you just showed up in my life. It's like, no, it's like, and can you consider for a minute that you might actually have some traits and qualities that are actually kind of attractive? Like, she seems to have such a low self-esteem of herself to believe that things just haven't worked out very well. In fact, this is giving me deja vu to my ex. You know, it's almost like she just can't comprehend that someone could love her, which is a glaring red flag because, it's interesting how she makes it out like, oh, well, all my other girlfriends were disappointed in me, not I self-sabotaged. Maybe I'm the common denominator. Maybe there's something for me to learn as to why they were disappointed. It's made out like all the girlfriends that she's had were the problem. They were just disappointed. Like they couldn't love me past the honeymoon phase. It's like, no, girl, you are the common denominator in these, what was it, 15 relationships you've had? Far out. I mean, if you can't point the finger back at yourself at this stage, you've got a real problem. Like, so at this stage, I'm like, I think I'm already figuring out a lot about Anne based on the short amount of stuff. Also, her saying, like, I think it's a great idea that we do couples counseling or couples therapy as a preventative measure. That sounds like lip service. She's saying that, I reckon, just being like, yeah, that sounds great, but I reckon when push comes to shove, she'll be like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. So, anyways, when Anne went back to Los Angeles, we'd made long-term plans. I'd fly to LA a month later and stay with her for 4 weeks. She'd be back again in November, and I'd spend Thanksgiving with her family. Now, the day before I flew to Los Angeles, Anne told me she couldn't wait to have me live with her. When she picked me up at the airport, I kissed her and said, I'm so happy to be here. She responded, oh, that's nice. Wow, that's a bit cold. I can start to see, yeah, this is like the real evidence of like where the disappointment's coming in. In the days that followed, our dynamic shifted. Yeah, I bet it did. On the face of it, we had a good time, but it was as if her feelings had suddenly evaporated. When she walked the dog, she'd say, I can just go by myself, it won't take long. And when we meet up with her friends, she'd sit at the other side of the table and ignored me in the conversation. Holding hands, quote unquote, made her shoulder ache. When waking up in the morning, she'd just turn on a news podcast instead of having a cuddle. Ah, yeah, she's shutting down. Like, this is real classic signs of her shutting down, avoiding intimacy. It's all on her. Like, I can understand why partners have found her disappointing because of what she's doing. She may not be aware of how much her own subconscious stuff is getting in the way of this, but the fact that there's been 15 partners of this now and she hasn't taken any accountability for this is just ridiculous. Like, it's like, and what is she? Like, much older than you. So she's quite biologically old. It's like, girl, where's your head at? I felt very lonely and confused. I bet you did, May. I know exactly what that feeling is like. It's the worst. It's like, how can I go from being with someone who made me feel so loved to feeling like I don't even exist in their world? It's the worst. May continues and said, why did I miss her when she was right next to me? Yeah, because she's put up walls between the two of you. There was a creeping feeling of desperation that I tried to stamp down. I brought it up one evening saying I'd like more reassurance. Maybe she could tell me sometimes that she was happy I was there or hug me in passing. She said she'd try and take my feedback on board, people pleasing. And she'd say, I know relationships always contain some stress because you constantly need to negotiate. Okay, interesting. Very interesting comment for someone who's had 15 years of relationships. Can I take a moment here to say, someone can have had a lot of relationship experience and be absolutely terrible at them. Never let someone's relationship history be a reflection of whether or not they're actually fit for a relationship. Just putting it out there. It is such a data point, but it doesn't mean much, in the face of things if the person can't actually do relationships. In any case, after having this conversation, things didn't change. It was as if she was annoyed I was there. One night, we met up with a friend from Japan. Anne mostly ignored me again. She and her friends started talking about how Anne could come to Japan soon, and she would say, I could stay for a month. Anne suggested, I'm sorry, and then I just sat there. My girlfriend was suggesting using the few paid days off that she had to travel to a friend and when would we see each other was the question I had in my head. I was wondering, was I going to be invited? It was as if I didn't factor into her plans at all. When I told her how I felt, she said, why do we need to have another emotional discussion? Is this going to be a weekly thing? Wow. Wow. Dismissive much? I'm going to say dismissive avoidant. At first, I was thinking fearful avoidant, but I'm going to say leaning heavy on the dismissive avoidant for this one. Wow. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. No. No, 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 Anne. Just no. Yuck. This behavior is so wrong. It is so just anti-relationship sort of stuff. How dare you have another friend over while you leave your girlfriend feeling isolated in the picture and have plans to visit the friend without involving your girlfriend in the mix as well too. That's disgusting behavior. This is just so not okay. Like it kills people. It just adds so much loneliness to people as well too. Gross. May writes, I tried to smile and pretend everything was fine. I remember lying next to her in bed, wondering if I should just go to the airport and leave. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised you thought that because often there can be that thought of being like, this is what's going to like make it better is if I just leave because it can make you feel like you don't actually matter. Now, the cruel irony of this is the fact that, the Anns of the world do want you, but on their terms at a very distanced level. And it's so not okay what she's doing to you. One night, I looked at the bedroom window and thought about jumping out. Oh, no, no, I'm so sorry you've had that thought. I've had so many people who've shared similar sort of ideations before as well, too. Like that's serious suicidal ideation sort of stuff that's coming up. But seriously, that is so normal for people to feel that way off the back of these experiences. So I am so sorry that this has taken you to that place. Fortunately, May writes, the thought of this terrified me. I'd felt bad before in life, but never so darkly suicidal. The next day, I broke down and sobbed. Anne was at a complete loss, and she said, I don't think I've done anything wrong. Oh my fucking God. It's like, girl, you've done everything wrong. I told her it felt like she prioritized everything in life above me. She was affronted and said, it sounds as if you're suggesting I should just give up things in my life. No! No! Oh my God, no. Okay, let's just take a moment here to address trauma brain. You know, we live in a world where I'm going to be brutally honest, it's very mentally and emotionally not great. And when we have a brain that's impacted by trauma and a lot of dysregulation, we will not see things in a coherent, clear way. Now, the danger for people living with an avoidant attachment is they're often in highly disassociative parts that mean that they don't actually see reality properly and they're so divorced from their own emotions and their empathy. So, this kind of left brain thinking of her being like, well, it just sounds like you're suggesting I should give up things in my life. It's like, no, May is not suggesting you give up any of that. She's asking you to involve her with her life. That's just what she's asking you to do. The fact that she's so affronted by your emotions, the fact that she can't even hold space for you, she's severely dismissively avoidant, like severely DA. And, she's got problems. Like to be brutally honest, until she goes to therapy and works on this, she has a relational disorder. She cannot do relationships properly at all. Like she really has a bad, 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 bad case of not being able to function properly in a relationship. So she's got big problems. The next morning, she suggested I fly back home and said, maybe you should be with your friends and family. She said, far out, the words I want to use to describe her. Um, LA doesn't seem to be a good place for you. I'm so worried about you. Yesterday was also very difficult for me. I can't go through another day like that because it drains me. I just don't have the emotional bandwidth, and I don't want to screw up at work because I'm too tired. Oh, fuck off. Like, just no. No. This is just so inappropriate to be saying this. And it's just, I understand where she's coming from because it's that whole idea of like, I don't want to feel shame because it makes me feel bad and it's just distracting me from everything. She clearly wants the friend, the work, the stuff to give her a sense of complete, you know, disconnection from anything that makes her feel uncomfortable inside of herself. When dismissive avoidants talk about their longing for peace, their peace is not a true grounded peace. It is a disassociative peace. It is the disassociative peace that comes up with not having to feel anything internally. And it's not a healthy place to be at. People with dismissive avoidant attachment and fearfuls often do struggle with dissociative disorders. And if they're not careful of this, it can lead to, big issues like severe memory loss, early onset amnesia, not amnesia, sorry, dementia related sort of stuff. Their brains are actually over functioning to compartmentalize stuff. It is not a healthy place to be in. Frankly, this should be a disorder in the DSM-5. I'm sorry, but it's a seriously unhealthy thing to have going on. And it just arrests your emotional development. So, this is so bad. I'm so sorry you're going through this, May. Anyways, we decided that I'd leave the next day. Suddenly, she was very sweet again. Yes, of course, because all of a sudden there's that distance that's being created. She told me she loved me very much and that she wouldn't know what to do if I ever hurt myself. She held my hand during the entire drive to the airport the next morning. Ugh, how confusing. So, for you to understand what I'm saying here, May, in case you're not aware, when you're getting to, like, not you doing this intentionally, but when you get close to someone who's like this, where intimacy builds, they freak out, shut down, and do anything in their power to push you away without directly communicating it. But then when you take a step back, that's when they feel that fondness for you return. They're like, oh my God, I want to have you back again. And it's very confusing because their feelings haven't gone, but they're often compartmentalized and shut down when they're feeling a lot of anxiety and stress at the closeness between you and, when they're with you in a relationship. So yeah, this is so fucked though, what's going on. Anyways, back in Europe, I felt disorientated and sad. In the 3 months that followed, I got more and more depressed. I started going to therapy, and after a difficult therapy session one day, she said, I think it's good I'm not there because then you just lose yourself in me and ignore the things you need to deal with. This way, you learn to be independent. Fuck you. Fuck you, Anne, and fuck you and your disassociative, disconnected, hyper independence. No, this is such a cop out. I bet, Anne, you're actually, sorry, not Anne, May, I bet you're actually a reasonably independent person. I bet you're actually reasonably good at taking care of yourself. The fact that you chose to go to therapy and not like hang on Anne for everything suggests to me you actually are reasonably independent. Let me make it clear. Independence is not a bad thing, but like anything in life, we take it too far and it becomes a problem. And I think that going back to this idea of trauma brain, the trauma brain of Anne is so messed up that she views everything under this belief of like, you have to be independent, you can't hang on everyone. Like, just so gross. When I suggested maybe we could do that couples therapy, she said, it's not that I don't want to, but I have relationship talk fatigue. I think we should focus on having fun. Things shouldn't be this heavy this early on in a relationship. More of the same. And I told you this wasn't going to happen. Like, for her, fun, lightheartedness, not having anything too deep and intimate, which is inevitably what's going to happen in a relationship, is going to happen. I've heard horror stories of the dismissive avoidance subreddits online. I've heard some people say it's like going into, a field of people who are very antisocial. Someone even said it's like, viewing people who are very psychopathic in nature because of the things they say about people. And it truly saddens me. And I have a lot of pity for people who are that, dismissive leaning in their avoidant attachment style because they're not functioning properly. And I know some people often argue, well, are they just built this way? And my answer is no, they are not. Yes, there are some people who are more logic brain thinkers, but even those that are slightly dismissive leaning with a more of a secure base don't operate like this because they still have access to their sense of self, their emotions, their empathy. Being slightly avoidant is not a problem in and of itself. But when you're this far down the line, the way you perceive things, the way you do things is so disordered, is so not conducive to good relationships. And I got to be honest, it's bad for your health as well, too. Going back to what I said about early onset dementia and a whole bunch of other things, this can fuck with your nervous system as well, too. You can get all kinds of autoimmune problems as well. So this is not a flex. This is very much a L if you're not careful with it. Anyways, our communication slowly became less. Anne rarely wanted to video call anymore, saying she was in video meetings all day at work already. She stopped sending selfies, saying she'd never liked them, and our calls became shorter. Oh, great. So she's definitely a people pleaser, and it sounds like she's going back on all this stuff. To me, she's starting to slow fade out of this relationship, so I wouldn't be surprised if you get to a point where either she abruptly ends things with you, or you terminate the relationship because you just can't have it anymore. And she'll say things like, yes, I just think that's what's for the best because you need someone who can take care of you. Such shitty sort of stuff that's going on right now, too. Cowardly behavior, too. Still, now this is interesting. May reckons Anne never technically did anything wrong because she sent me a voice message every day telling me that she loved me and missed me. So why did I feel like I was starving? I wrote down all the nice things she said to try and remember them. So I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped doing my hobbies. I couldn't concentrate at work. I felt so worthless and sad. Okay, May, this is where I'm going to shine a big spotlight on you and be like, oh, no, 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 no. Honey, she's done so many things wrong. You know, I know you may not have language to understand what she's done wrong or why she's done stuff that's wrong, but here's something I want you to hold on to. This is not the first time she's likely done this. She's had 15 relationships. This behavior is a pattern of which has been going on for a while, where she believes that this is the right way to do relationships, that you need to be independent, and why can't I just do my own thing without considering your wants and needs? Sorry, I just don't want to consider your wants and needs. She has built up this belief that her way of life is right. You are being emotionally neglected. It speaks to the way she was probably raised. It also speaks to the way you were probably raised. Because if you're experiencing this and trying to find all these ways to salvage this relationship, it may suggest that you have experienced a lack of emotional attunement from your caregivers. Because even though, yes, on the surface, she's doing the quote unquote right things by saying the right things, internally, you are not feeling it. You are feeling emotionally deprived of a lot of oxygen and connection. I've heard so many people tell me similar stories about what's going on. So please, I understand that maybe this is your first time on the rodeo with a dismissive avoidant, but I want to just make it clear that firstly, you didn't know what you didn't know. But secondly, be bloody careful, moving forward with this sort of stuff, because it may indicate that you have also experienced, relationships, even with caregivers, where you haven't had a lot of that attunement and connection you've needed. And that has made relationships with people like May, sorry, Anne, my brain flips with names. With Anne, something very familiar based on what you've experienced before as well, too. Maybe you've had a mum or a dad who's quite emotionally disconnected. But yeah, just thought I'd point that out because a lot of this links and a lot of this tracks. But yeah, the depression you're feeling and stepping away from friends and hobbies makes so much sense in light of what you're experiencing. When Anne came back in November, she stayed at a hotel rather than at my place, and she would say, "It's just easier for work." She shrugged. We still saw each other, but she seemed less into it and avoided any difficult conversations. Yeah, of course she did. See, this is still wrong. You know, in relationships, there's no confrontation that's happening here. So I think there's a problem. She would say, "I've taken a step back to protect myself," she admitted. "You're not the fun and happy girl that I fell in love with anymore." Wow. Wow. What a bitch. Just disgusting sort of stuff. I myself didn't understand why I wasn't fun and happy anymore. How had I gotten so depressed out of nowhere? Oh, I can tell you why. I mean, it's because this relationship has just deprived you of so much of what you need in a relationship. Sometimes it was as if Anne tried to get me to break up with her. And she'd say, "I've been in multiple long distance relationships and they work really well for me," she'd say. "But this doesn't seem to be working for you. If anything in me is triggering you, we need to have serious conversation." I knew my choice was basically to take it or leave it. Crumbs still seemed better than nothing. Again, something for you to consider, May, in your future, which is why you're so, hooked to these breadcrumbs, because that's important to think about for your recovery moving forward. But I read a letter that was like this, where I was with Amy for this letter, and this on the surface sounds like a very healthy relationship thing to be saying. If this doesn't seem to be working for you, or if anything in me is triggering you, we need to have a serious conversation. However, she has shown she doesn't want to have relationship talks. She doesn't want to actually discuss that. She doesn't want to go to couples therapy. She's putting this all on you as if to say, "You're the problem. So if you're bothered, you should do the breakup because I don't want to deal with it." And it's like, no, Anne, you are the problem in this relationship. Yes, May, you've got some stuff that you definitely need to work on for yourself, but it has nothing to do with Anne's behavior towards you. What you're going through, May, is, clinging on to the scraps that you're getting in this, but this is not good. Anyways, after she flew back to the US, Anne said she no longer thought it'd be a good idea for me to come to Thanksgiving. Reluctantly, she agreed to rebooking the tickets to New Year's just for 5 days. When I said tickets were much cheaper if I stayed an extra day, she said, "You'll have to stay at an airport hotel by yourself because my brother is still in town then." She also announced that she was going cycling with friends 2 out of the 5 days together. And when I asked if I could tag along, she said, "I don't think that's a good idea." She's supposed to be your fucking girlfriend. I just feel like, oh, this is so bad. 6 months after we first met, Anne said we needed to evaluate how often we talked. And she said, I don't want you to look forward to my voice messages this much. Your happiness can't hinge on a single person. That's too much pressure. I feel guilty all the time knowing I'm not meeting your needs." Well, then do something about it, Anne. Like, okay, I want to draw a bit of a comparison. There are some relationships where the person is indeed asking for too much. And, it's one of those things where it's normal for someone's, we all have avoidant parts in us, and it's actually quite healthy. when using my phone as the relationship line again, we have a little line here in the middle where we want people to be ideally, equidistant from each other. Avoidants tend to be too far away from the center, which is what draws their partner closer. But if you have someone who's coming too close to you and getting closer to that line in the middle of you, it naturally flares up the avoidance side in us and makes us go, can you back the fuck off? And the problem with a lot of avoidant attachers is their avoidancy is way too big. It's overdeveloped. And so as a consequence, they tend to make it seem like you're being unreasonable for having quite reasonable demands of a relationship. And this is not a case where, May, I feel like you've been needy or clingy. If anything, you're asking for the bare minimum, which Anne is depriving you of. So, yeah, just, oh, Jesus Christ. Also, where's Anne's agency in this? If she doesn't like the fact that she's feeling so guilty, where's her boundaries at? Why isn't she saying, listen, I don't like the fact that I'm feeling this way in this relationship. I feel like I'm being, not that she is. I've been emotionally manipulated before, but I don't feel like you're being emotionally manipulative. If anything, you're like, listen, I'm feeling this way in this relationship. Can we talk about it? And she's just denying, depriving, not talking about it. It's not okay. Anyways. Okay, where are we? So she was saying, it seems like this relationship is causing us both a lot of anxiety, pain, and stress. And she said, I think we should take some time apart. That's when I said I was done. That 5-minute phone call was the last I ever heard from her. No. And a few weeks later, she texted my mum asking her to make sure I'd cancelled my New Year's ticket. I sent her a long email saying that I still loved her very much and wanted to make it work, and she never responded. What a just dreadful human being. I was going to use a stronger word. I was an absolute wreck after the breakup. I knew I'd felt like crap 3 out of the 6 months we'd been together, but still I desperately missed her. Of course you did. I barely recognized myself. I don't think I've ever seen my loved ones this worried about me. 2 months later, Anne was back on the dating app where we'd met. This time her profile said she was open to more than just friends. Oh my God. She changed her picture to the one I'd taken of her in my kitchen the summer before when we'd been at our happiest. I was devastated. These days, I don't cry as often anymore, but I still think about her every day and I still miss her with all my heart. Will there ever come a day when I don't love her anymore? Yes, it'll happen, but not right now. I thought we were going to spend the rest of our lives together. How am I supposed to suddenly stop caring about her? And how did things go so wrong? I've accepted that there was probably nothing I could have done, but the grief is bottomless, unlike anything I've ever experienced. May, I'm truly so sorry you've gone through this. I know exactly what it's like to go through an experience like this. And if anything, I was getting deja vu as I was reading this. The grief is bottomless. It's the worst. It's honestly a rock bottom like no other. And I'm not even joking. It is the single most painful thing I've ever gone through. And I'm sure it's the single most painful thing you've ever gone through as well, too. You did not deserve what happened to you. I'm really sorry for what happened here between you and Anne. Listen, as always, I know Anne wasn't just the dismissive avoidance side of her. I'm sure there are many amazing things about her, particularly in the beginning. However, she is a raging dismissive avoidant, and she's unlikely to heal anytime soon because she just wants things to be fun and playful. Well, I say to her, enjoy your traumatized existence because it is a choice. If you want to be that way, fine. But know there are consequences. I would love there to be a world where we actually normalize that this is not okay behavior and we can start undoing the damage that has happened over generations of stuff because I just think, it's not okay. And listen, if it sounds like I'm coming down heavily on the avoidant attachers, I want to make it very clear that those of us that are, in our anxious attachment who also aren't working on ourselves face very similar health risks to those that are on the avoidance side of the spectrum. There is no benefit to staying stuck in insecure attachment land because it does link very much with mind-body related stuff. And you've got to be careful of that stuff because it can impact you heavily. So even though I know trauma isn't the base for everything, it does unfortunately compromise a lot of our well-being in a lot of critical areas of our life as well too. Relational stress, being in unsatisfying jobs, having poor success in the things that we want to be good at. It does interfere with our life path in so many ways. Anyways, May, thank you for sharing this letter. I was very happy to read this for you. And again, I'm very sorry that you've gone through this because this was very intense.